I didn't think I'd be the guy writing something like this. I'm just a regular man, really. Grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where folks still wave when they drive past you, even if they don't know your name. I've been through a lot. This ain't my first marriage. My first wife and I divorced in our early 30s, no infidelity or anything like that, just two people who grew apart once the kids were grown and the silence got too loud. We ended on decent terms. Split the furniture, split the holidays, and moved on with our lives. But this second time around, this one hurts in ways I don't know how to put into words just yet. Her name is Rachel. She's everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Strong, sharp, beautiful in that classic, natural way. We met at a friend's cookout, real low-key, beer in hand, lawn chairs and all. I remember she was laughing with her sister by the grill, hair pulled back, not trying to be anything for anyone. That laugh, it wasn't loud, but it stuck in my head. I don't know why that mattered so much. Maybe because it sounded honest. I'd been divorced for a year at that point. I wasn't really looking, I had my boys every other weekend, worked full-time at a logistics company, owned a little 3-bedroom place with a swing in the front yard I never used. Life was simple. Predictable. A little lonely, but that was better than chaos. Rachel was different. She worked in HR at a mid-sized firm and had never been married before, no kids. She liked camping, real coffee, and she hated pineapple on pizza. We had debates about that for weeks. She'd been burned before too, long relationship in her 20s that ended ugly. She had her guard up, same as me. But slowly, we let each other in. We got married 3 years after that cookout. Quiet courthouse wedding. We wanted to buy a house more than we wanted to throw a party. Settled just outside Dayton, somewhere with decent schools and neighbors who'd help you jump your car in the winter. For a while, everything felt right. Not perfect, but good. We built something steady. We had a rhythm, Monday through Friday was work, dinner, maybe a walk around the block. Weekends we'd hit the farmer's market or watch the Buckeyes. I cooked, she cleaned. She handled bills, I did yard work. We made it work. And then somewhere along the way, things shifted. At first, it was subtle. She started staying later at work. Told me there were new projects and more responsibility. I was proud of her, really proud. She's the kind of woman who takes care of things. Organized. Efficient. The one people go to when stuff hits the fan. But she also started getting quieter at home. Tired, she said. Headaches. Didn't feel like talking. She used to tell me everything, even the dumb little things, what someone said in the elevator, what she overheard in line at Target. But then, those stories stopped. I didn't think much of it. Life gets busy. Stress does funny things. Plus, I'm not exactly Mr. Talkative myself. I figured we were just going through one of those dry patches couples have. You get through it, right? I still don't know exactly when it started. The affair. The betrayal. I know now who he is, but I'll save that for later. All I knew back then was that something wasn't right. I could feel it, like the air in our home had changed. Heavier. Colder. But when I tried to bring it up, she'd brush me off. I'm just tired, or you're imagining things. And maybe I wanted to believe that. Maybe I needed to. Because facing the truth? That the woman I trusted, the woman I shared a home and a life with, was slowly slipping away into someone else's arms, that was a reality I wasn't ready for. Not yet. They say hindsight is 20/20, and now that I'm standing here, looking back, I see things I didn't see before. Or maybe I did see them, I just didn't want to believe what they meant. Rachel started taking her phone with her everywhere. Not just in her purse, on her person. Bathroom, kitchen, laundry room, didn't matter. She used to leave it charging on the nightstand, screen facing up. These days, it was always face down. Once, I asked if she was waiting on an important call and she laughed, too quick, too high-pitched, and said something like, "I just don't want work stuff popping up and stressing me out at night." It seemed like a decent answer at the time. Logical. Rachel's the kind of woman who compartmentalizes everything. Boxes and labels for everything in her head. But looking back, I think she was already lying then. I just didn't want to push. I've always been the type to give space, maybe too much. I've never liked the idea of snooping. If you have to go digging for trust, it's already gone, right? We stopped being intimate a few months before everything came to a head. She blamed hormones, stress, bad sleep. And I get it, married life isn't all sparks and fire forever. But she'd always been affectionate, even in the small ways. A hand on my back when she passed me in the hallway. A kiss on the cheek when I brought her coffee. That faded too. One night I asked, gently, "Are we okay?" She looked up from her phone, startled. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," I said. "You just seem far away lately." She sighed, like I'd asked her to build a house with her bare hands. "I'm just overwhelmed. Work's been non-stop, and I feel like I have nothing left when I get home. I'm sorry if I've been distant." That was her answer. Not cruel. Not warm. Just tired. And I believed her. A few weeks after that, I had to take my truck in for service, so she picked me up after work. I climbed into the passenger seat and her car smelled different. Not like her usual cherry-scented air freshener. It smelled like a different cologne. Sharp. Musky. Not mine. My stomach turned. But again, I said nothing. I sat in silence while she talked about her day. I think that was the moment I started wondering if I was losing my mind. This woman I'd built a life with. I couldn't tell if she was lying or if I was just being paranoid. I mentioned it to a buddy of mine from work, real casual, over lunch. "You ever feel like your wife is just off lately? Like something's different but you can't put your finger on it?" He raised his eyebrows. "You think she's cheating?" I practically choked on my sandwich. No. Nothing like that. Just. I don't know. She's been distant." He nodded, took a sip of his Coke. "Sometimes people drift. That's marriage, man. Or sometimes they're hiding something." That last part stuck with me. That weekend, I was in the garage, sorting through a box of old tools, and I found one of her sweatshirts stuffed in the back seat of her car. Men's hoodie. Not mine. Black Nike, size large. I held it up like it might give me answers. The collar smelled like aftershave. Still, I said nothing. I know. You're probably reading this thinking, how did you not confront her? How much more did you need? But let me tell you, when you love someone, when you need to believe in them, you'll twist your own brain into knots to avoid the truth. Instead of accusing her, I tried harder. I planned a weekend trip up north, just the two of us, cabin by the lake like we used to do. She said she couldn't get time off, that work was too hectic. That same weekend, she told me she had to go into the office on Saturday. I offered to make her breakfast before she left and she looked uncomfortable. Said she'd just grab something on the road. She didn't come home until after 7. Her excuse? One of the senior VPs had a last-minute meeting. But she didn't have her laptop. No notes. No takeout bag. Just a worn-out expression and another shower before dinner. That night, I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, her back turned to me like I was a stranger. I remember thinking, if I ask and she lies to me, what then? What if she tells the truth? I didn't know what answer would hurt more. And so I didn't ask. Not yet. A month later, I finally let myself look. That was the turning point. I wish I could say I regret it, but the truth is I already knew what I was going to find. My gut had been screaming at me for weeks, and I kept shoving a pillow over its mouth, hoping it would quiet down. It was a Tuesday night, nothing special about it. Rachel had fallen asleep early on the couch. TV still flickering, a half glass of red wine sweating on the end table. She was curled up in the corner like someone trying to disappear into herself. Her phone was on the floor just beneath her hand, screen still glowing from a message that must have just come in. I told myself, just check the preview. Just enough to put your mind at ease. But once I picked it up, my hands moved on their own. I didn't know her passcode, but my fingers did. Same one she used for the garage keypad, the one I'd helped set up last spring. Muscle memory. There it was. A name I didn't recognize, Chris, but it was the string of hearts and winks that made my stomach drop. The kind of emojis you don't send your coworker. The kind you definitely don't send if you're someone's wife. I opened the thread. There weren't hundreds of messages. Just a dozen or so, but they were enough. Enough to take the breath out of my lungs. Wish I could see you tonight. I miss your hands. He has no clue. Same time Saturday? That one hit the hardest. Saturday. The day she said she was, in the office. I stood there in the dim light of the living room, holding her phone like it was a grenade. I kept hoping it was some sick misunderstanding. A prank. But you don't say, I miss your hands, to your boss. You don't plan secret Saturdays with your brother. This wasn't a stretch or a suspicion anymore. This was real. I didn't wake her up. I didn't shout. I didn't throw her phone or cry or pack a bag. I just sat there. I sat in the dark and stared at the woman I thought I knew. Her breathing soft and even, like she didn't have a single worry in the world. Like she wasn't cracking my whole world in half behind my back. I couldn't sleep that night. I went to the garage and sat in my truck with the engine off, just staring at the dashboard. It felt like I'd been punched in the chest but couldn't find the bruise. By the time the sun came up, I still hadn't decided what to do. Do I confront her? Do I wait and try to gather more? Do I tell someone? I didn't even know who I could talk to. My closest friends all lived in different states. My parents had passed years ago. My boys from my first marriage, they're both in college now, and I sure as hell wasn't going to drag them into this. I felt like I was on an island, and the only person who knew how I got there was the one who stranded me. That day at work, I went through the motions. Emails, calls, project updates. Everyone thought I was just tired. I smiled. I nodded. I played the role. But inside, it was like something had broken loose and was rattling around, smashing into things I thought were solid. That night, I checked again. There were no new messages. She must have deleted the thread. But I'd already taken screenshots and emailed them to myself. I guess some part of me wanted to hold on to the evidence, like maybe I'd wake up and convince myself it had all been a dream. And then I could pull them up and remind myself, no, you're not crazy. This is real. She kissed me that night. Just a quick peck on the cheek as she passed me on the way to the bathroom. It felt like someone else's life. I didn't kiss her back. And she didn't notice. I waited 4 more days before I said anything. That probably sounds ridiculous. Maybe even cowardly. But it's hard to explain how surreal it feels to live with someone, eat dinner with them, fold their laundry, while silently holding the knowledge that they've betrayed you. It's like living with a ghost, except they don't know they're dead yet. Rachel didn't act any different, which somehow made it worse. She still asked how my day was, still left her coffee mug in the sink instead of the dishwasher, still laughed at reruns of Brooklyn Nine-Nine when we watched TV before bed. There were even moments, small, passing things, where I caught myself thinking maybe I'd made a mistake. Maybe the messages were old, or misread, or I don't know, a joke between friends that just didn't translate in text. But then I'd remember, he has no clue. And that would be enough to shut those thoughts down. On Saturday, the same Saturday I knew she was supposed to meet him, I made breakfast like nothing was wrong. Pancakes and bacon, coffee in her favorite mug with the tiny chip in the handle. She came into the kitchen in her hoodie and messy bun, thanked me with a kiss on the cheek, and sat down like we were any other couple. She told me she had errands to run. Needed to pick up some things for the house. Said it real casual, like she hadn't used that same line the last time she went to see him. I just nodded. Around noon, she left. Said she'd be back in a few hours. I said okay, told her to drive safe. Watched her car pull out of the driveway like I had 100 times before. But this time, I followed her. It felt like I was in a bad movie. Heart pounding, trying to stay a few cars back, wondering if someone like me could even pull off something like this. She wasn't heading toward the store, I knew that fast. She took the highway, exited near a strip of little motels just outside the city limits. Ones that don't ask questions. She pulled into one of them. Beige stucco, faded sign. Sunset Lodge. She parked. Stayed in the car for a minute, probably texting him. Then a silver SUV pulled in beside her. A man got out. Tall, younger than me, athletic. The kind of guy who probably spent too much time in a gym and not enough time thinking about consequences. She got out. Smiled. Hugged him like she belonged there. They walked toward the motel entrance together. And that was it. That was the moment something inside me just flipped. It wasn't rage, not really. Not even grief. It was like a numb sort of clarity. The kind that only comes when something you love dies. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there in my truck and felt this hollow space open up inside me. I didn't wait to see them come back out. I drove home, pulled into the garage, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the wall for what must have been an hour. Then I got up, went to the bedroom, and started packing a bag. Not hers, mine. Because I realized something in that moment. I still didn't know what I was going to say when she came home. I didn't even know if I wanted to have that conversation yet. But I knew I couldn't look her in the eyes and pretend anymore. I couldn't sit across the table from her and swallow this thing down just to keep the peace. I couldn't keep lying to myself, pretending like this was a marriage. She had already walked out. All I was doing was catching up. She came home around 4:30. I was sitting on the porch, duffel bag at my feet, half a cup of cold coffee in my hand. I watched her pull into the driveway, calm as you please. She didn't see my bag at first. Just smiled like she had a secret. Which, I guess, she did. "Hey, babe," she said, stepping out of the car. "I picked up those new filters for the AC, figured we could switch them out tonight." Like we were just a couple talking about chores. Like she hadn't spent the last few hours in a motel room with another man. I didn't say anything. Just looked at her. She glanced down, finally noticed the bag. Her smile flickered. "Are you going somewhere?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "Figured I'd give you some space. You seemed like you needed it." She blinked. "What are you talking about?" And that's when I stood up. "I know, Rachel." My voice sounded distant, even to me. "I know about him. I know about the motel. I know everything." Her face changed instantly. First confusion, then fear, then this strange defensiveness, like she was scrambling to come up with the right version of a lie. "What are you talking about?" she repeated, too fast. "You were with him today. Sunset Lodge. Silver SUV. I followed you." Her mouth opened, closed. You followed me? That's your takeaway?" I asked. "Not the cheating. Not the lies. You're upset because I followed you?" Norm, this isn't what you think." I laughed. Couldn't help it. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of something cracking down the middle. "Don't insult me, Rachel. Please." I saw it with my own eyes. She crossed her arms, which I'd come to realize was her armor. "Okay," she said. "Fine. You saw us. So now what? You gonna throw 10 years away because of this?" I stared at her, stunned. "You already threw it away." She looked down at her shoes, the silence between us stretching long and sharp. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said after a while. "It just." I felt alone. "You've been so distant lately." That part stung. I wanted to scream. "I was distant because you were already gone, Rachel. You could have said something," I managed. "We could have talked. We've been through harder things than this. But instead, you turned away from me and into someone else." Tears filled her eyes. Real ones. I knew her well enough to tell the difference. But I couldn't trust what was behind them anymore. "I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered. "You didn't have to," I said. "Your phone told me. Your lies told me. The cologne on your sweatshirt told me. I was just too stupid to listen." She sat down on the porch steps, suddenly looking small. "I don't even know why I did it. It's not like he's better. He's not." "That's worse, Rachel," I said quietly. "That makes it worse." I didn't stay much longer. Just told her I was going to my brother's for a while. That I needed space. That I needed time to figure out what came next. She didn't argue. Didn't beg me to stay. She just sat there and nodded. And that might have been the worst part. Because I think deep down, she already knew she'd lost me. My brother lives about 30 minutes away in a quiet suburb, the kind of place with good schools, chain restaurants, and kids playing basketball in cul-de-sacs. His house is warm in that family way, fridge cluttered with finger paintings, dog hair on the couch, a basket of unmatched socks by the stairs. It was the complete opposite of what I'd just left behind, and honestly, it felt like a different planet. He and his wife didn't ask a lot of questions when I showed up with my bag. Just offered me a spare room and a hot meal. That night, I sat across from them at the dinner table, trying to make conversation with their 6-year-old about dinosaurs, and I kept thinking, how did I end up here? I was supposed to be the one who had it all together. The second chance guy. The one who'd learned from his past mistakes and finally figured out what love was supposed to look like. And now? I was living in someone else's guest room, my life boxed up in a duffel bag, my wife, no, the woman I thought was my wife, back home in the house we picked out together, eating dinner with ghosts. That first week was hard. Mornings were the worst. I'd wake up early, forgetting for a moment where I was. My hand would reach out to the empty side of the bed, expecting her. Expecting warmth. But there'd be nothing but the faint light of dawn creeping through a stranger's window. She texted me a few times. First just, "Are you okay?" Then, "I miss you. I'm sorry." Eventually, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every time her name popped up, my chest tightened. Because even though I'd seen the truth with my own eyes, a part of me still missed her. Missed the version of her that I married. The woman who used to sneak mini Snickers into my lunch when I had a bad week. The one who cried during reruns of Friday Night Lights even though she'd seen them all 3 times. But that woman wasn't the one who'd met a stranger in a motel room and told him I had no clue. The real pain isn't the betrayal itself, it's realizing how easily someone you trusted can wear a mask. How much of what you shared was real, and how much was just convenience dressed up like connection. A few days later, I called a lawyer. Not because I was ready to file yet, but because I needed to understand what that path would look like if I had to take it. Turns out I wasn't just heartbroken, I was also underprepared. The house was in both our names. We had a shared savings account. No kids together, thank God, but untangling everything else? It wasn't going to be quick or clean. I talked to my ex-wife, too. Funny, right? We've stayed civil over the years for the sake of the boys, but we don't usually get into personal stuff. Still, she listened. She didn't say, "I told you so." Just said, "I'm sorry. Nobody deserves that." And she meant it. I think part of me needed that. To know that even someone I failed once could still see the human in me now. By the end of that week, I started making a list. Not of what I wanted from Rachel. But of what I needed for myself. Boundaries. Clarity. Peace. I needed to understand that forgiveness didn't have to mean reconciliation. That walking away wasn't giving up, it was choosing to protect the pieces of myself I still had left. I didn't know yet if I'd divorce her. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back to the man I was before I saw that motel parking lot. Because he didn't know the truth. And now I did. I don't know how many times I stared at her name on my phone before I finally answered one of her calls. I'd been dodging her texts, her voicemails. It was easier to let the silence do the talking. But one night, about 2 weeks after I left, I was sitting on my brother's back porch, nursing a beer and watching the wind move through the trees, when the phone rang again. Rachel. I didn't think. I just picked up. She sounded surprised. You answered. Yeah. Silence. Then she said, "I didn't think you would." I took a breath. "So why did you keep calling?" "Because I miss you. Because I can't sleep. Because I don't know how to fix this and I hate what I did. Because I'm scared." Her voice cracked on that last word. And I'll be honest, hearing her like that, broken and unsure, it stirred something in me. Not forgiveness. Not hope. Just sorrow. A familiar kind of ache. "You should have been scared before," I said. "When it still mattered." "I know," she whispered. "I was stupid. I was selfish. I don't even recognize the person I've been lately." I didn't know what to say. It wasn't like I had a script for this moment. "I want to see you," she added quietly. I stared at the sky. "Why?" "I need to look you in the eye and tell you I'm sorry." "Not over a phone." I waited a beat, then nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "Okay." We met at a diner halfway between her place and my brother's. Neutral ground. I got there first, sat in a booth by the window, hands flat on the formica table like I was trying to keep myself anchored. She walked in wearing that old green sweater I always liked, the one with the little rip in the sleeve she refused to throw out. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, tired eyes. She looked older. Or maybe just more real. She sat across from me and didn't say anything at first. Just stared at me like she didn't know where to begin. So I did. "How long?" "About 3 months," she said. "We met at work. He's in one of the project teams we collaborate with. It started as flirting. Then lunch. Then, she trailed off." "You lied to me for months," I said, more calmly than I expected. "And you were going to keep lying." She nodded slowly. "I was. Because I thought if I admitted it, I'd lose everything. You still might. That got to her. She looked down at the menu she wasn't reading. I don't love him. I never did. It was excitement, attention. I felt seen. That part stung. You think I didn't see you? She shook her head. No. You did. I don't even know how to explain it. I felt like I was disappearing, and he made me feel alive again. And then it was like I couldn't stop. I stared at her. This woman I used to think I knew inside and out. Do you regret it? Or do you just regret getting caught? That made her cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears slipping down her face. She wiped them away with her sleeve. Both, she said. I regret hurting you. I regret risking the best thing I ever had. I regret letting myself become the kind of person who'd betray someone like you. The waitress came by, realized the energy at our table, and left without asking anything. I can't make you forgive me, Rachel said. I don't even know if I'd forgive me. But I had to say it, face to face. I'm sorry, Norm. Truly. I'm so sorry. And for a moment, I just sat there, staring at the woman who used to be my world. I believed her. But the thing is, sometimes sorry doesn't fix what's broken. Sometimes it's just the first shovel of dirt on something that's already buried. A week after the diner, I moved back home. Not to reconcile. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I came back because it was still my house too. Because I was tired of living out of a bag, sleeping in someone else's spare room, trying to hold my life together in someone else's space. Rachel and I talked it through, set clear boundaries. Separate bedrooms. No pretending. No playing house. We agreed to take some time under the same roof, to figure out what came next. But the moment I walked through that front door, I knew it wouldn't be easy. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Her shoes by the door. The mail stacked neatly on the counter. The little yellow mug she always used for tea still sitting in the drying rack. It was all normal. Familiar. But I didn't feel like I was home. We were polite, careful. Almost formal with each other, like coworkers forced to share an office after a messy HR incident. We avoided the heavy stuff for a while. Talked about groceries, bills, what day the trash went out. We even sat through an episode of that cooking show we used to love, saying barely a word. It was surreal, like watching actors playing us on a stage that used to be real life. At night, we went to separate rooms. I'd hear her brushing her teeth, the hum of her white noise machine through the wall. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me in the hallway, like she was trying to memorize the face of someone she might never see this close again. She apologized again, more than once. Asked if I had questions. I told her I did. But I wasn't ready to ask them yet. Truth was, I didn't know if I wanted the answers. Because answers come with consequences. Answers mean decisions. And I was still hanging somewhere between heartbreak and survival. One night, about 2 weeks in, she came to my doorway. Knocked, like a guest. "Can I sit?" she asked. I nodded. She sat on the edge of the bed, facing away from me. "I've been reading books. About affairs. About rebuilding trust." Her voice was soft, careful. "Most of them say it takes years. That both people have to want it. That you have to be willing to burn it all down to rebuild something new." I said nothing. She looked over her shoulder at me. "Do you want that, Norm? To rebuild?" I stared at the wall for a long time before answering. "I don't know." She nodded like she expected it. "I understand. I'm not angry anymore," I added. "Not the same way I was. But I don't trust you. And I don't know if I ever will. Her eyes welled up again. I saw her shoulders shake once before she stood up. Let me know if that changes, she said quietly. Because I'd fight for this if there's even a chance. If you tell me there's no chance, I'll stop. I didn't stop her from walking out of the room. I didn't follow her. I just sat there, staring at the place on the bed where she'd been. And wondering how two people could be so close, yet feel so impossibly far apart. I think what people don't talk about enough is the way betrayal doesn't always come with fire and fury. Sometimes it's quiet. A slow unraveling. You wake up one day and realize the version of your life you'd been holding on to no longer exists, and no one told you it had died. Rachel and I existed in that quiet for a while. She kept to herself, for the most part. No more secret meetings, no late-night phone calls, no perfume that wasn't hers. She made an effort. I'll give her that. She cooked more. She cleaned up without being asked. Started therapy. Asked if I wanted to join her sometime. And I could tell she was hoping all of that would be enough. That if she just showed up every day, I might start seeing her the way I used to. But the thing is, I couldn't. Not fully. I'd catch myself watching her move around the house and wonder, was he in this kitchen? Did she text him while we were watching TV? Did she ever think about me when she was with him? And yeah, maybe those thoughts will fade with time. Maybe they won't. But either way, they've taken root. And that changes things. I remember one night we had a laugh about something, I don't even remember what. Some dumb commercial or old inside joke, and for a split second, it felt like us again. But the moment passed, and all I could think afterward was, she laughed like that with him too. That's what infidelity does. It doesn't just hurt you in the moment, it robs you of the good ones too. Even the memories start to feel tainted. About 3 months after I moved back in, I came home from work one night and found her sitting at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a pen. She'd made a list. I could tell from the way she looked up at me, nervous, like she wasn't sure how this would go. She slid it across the table. I wrote down everything I could remember, she said. Every detail you might want. When it started, how often, where. Even things I didn't think you'd want to hear. I want you to have the truth. All of it. I stared at the paper. I didn't touch it. Why now? I asked. Because I know I lied for a long time. And I'm trying to stop doing that. I don't want to carry secrets anymore. If we're going to move forward, or even just decide we can't, I don't want you making that decision with half the truth. I nodded slowly. And if I don't read it? That's your choice. I just needed to write it. I didn't read it. Not that night. I tucked it in a drawer and left it there. But it did something to me, that gesture. Not forgiveness. Not closure. Just a shift. I could see she was trying. Genuinely. She wasn't blaming me anymore. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't begging. She was just there. Present. Vulnerable. And I started to realize something that I didn't want to admit. I didn't hate her. I wasn't even sure I could. But I also wasn't sure I could love her again the way I had before. And that's when I understood what I'd been putting off for months. Some things don't go back to how they were. No matter how much you want them to. No matter how much you both change or apologize or try. Some things stay broken. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do, for both of you, is to stop trying to glue the pieces back together. It was a Sunday morning when I told her. The sun was just starting to come through the blinds, the house still quiet. We were sitting across from each other at the kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee, 1 half-eaten slice of toast between us. It almost looked like normal. But I think we both knew what was coming. "I've made a decision," I said. She looked up from her mug, bracing herself. "I want a divorce." For a second, she didn't move. No tears. No gasps. Just a long, still moment where I could almost see her heart crack behind her eyes. She nodded slowly. "Okay." No argument. No begging. Just okay. And you know what? That hurt more than I expected. I guess some part of me had been preparing for a fight, something to justify the pain. But she didn't give me that. She just accepted it. "I know you tried," I said after a moment. "I know you've been trying these past few months. And I don't want you to think I didn't see that." "I know," she whispered. "But it's not enough. Not for me. I'm tired of living in this in-between space, where every good moment is followed by a shadow. I don't want to resent you, Rachel. I don't want us to hate each other down the road." She nodded again, this time with tears in her eyes. "I don't want that either." We sat there for a while, the two of us, quiet but not cold. Just two people acknowledging the end of something. A few weeks later, I filed the papers. We split things fairly. No messy courtroom drama. No dragged-out arguments over who gets what. We agreed to sell the house. She found a small apartment not far from her office. I moved into a rental for now, nothing fancy, but enough. Enough space to breathe. We don't talk much these days. A text here or there about paperwork, insurance, stuff that still lingers in the gray. But there's no anger. No venom. Just a quiet understanding that something once beautiful had run its course. I still think about her sometimes. Little moments. A song on the radio. The way she used to curl up on the couch in winter, fuzzy socks and all. I don't hate those memories. I don't hate her either. That's the part one never expected. I thought the betrayal would define everything. That I'd carry it like a scar I couldn't stop tracing. But the truth is, I've started to heal. Not all at once. Not cleanly. But slowly, and in pieces. I've started hiking again. Something I gave up when life got too busy. I've reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with. I've been spending more time with my sons, even met someone for coffee last week, not a date, just two people talking. But it felt good. It felt normal. And most importantly, I've started forgiving myself. Not for staying too long. Not for believing in her. But for hoping. Because hope isn't weakness. It's just love, trying its best to survive. I'll always carry a piece of that marriage with me. The good and the bad. But I'm not trying to go back anymore. I'm moving forward. One quiet, honest step at a time.